Breaking news from London. A move that no one in modern British politics saw coming. King Charles has just stepped directly into the heart of Parliament's power struggle, and the political establishment is in shock. Not just surprised, stunned. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation. This is not insider gossip whispered behind closed palace doors. This is a royal intervention that unfolded in real time, in front of the very people who believed the monarchy had been permanently pushed into silence and symbolic ceremony. And at the center of the chaos stands one man, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, whose reaction has already become the subject of frantic headlines, emergency strategy meetings, and quiet late-night phone calls across Whitehall. And trust me when I tell you this, the panic was real, because what King Charles just did does not happen. Ever. Not in this era. Not under constitutional monarchy. Not without consequences that echo across nations. The air in Parliament was already tense. Discussions regarding national funding, constitutional reforms, and rising public dissatisfaction were boiling under the surface. Ministers whispered. Advisors exchanged glances. Everyone knew something was shifting, but no one knew how soon it would erupt. And then, without warning, the quiet murmurs of routine political debate were shattered. Doors opened, eyes turned, and the room fell into a silence so sharp it felt like history itself stopped to watch. King Charles entered. Not as a ceremonial symbol, not as a polite guest at a governmental formality, but as a monarch, stepping forward with purpose, with intent, with something to say. This was not scheduled. This was not arranged. There were no prepared speeches handed out beforehand. Starmer, seated and confident, only moments before, visibly froze, because every political figure in that chamber knew the truth. When a monarch steps into active political discourse, something serious has reached a breaking point. And the question that electrified the room was simple. What pushed Charles to act now? King Charles looked across the room, not with arrogance, not with royal superiority, but with the expression of a man who had watched enough. A man who had endured months, even years, of political maneuvering, public criticism, media manipulation, and subtle challenges to the monarchy's relevance and authority. He saw his family questioned. He saw tradition mocked. He saw history being treated as disposable. And now, he was done watching. His voice was firm, controlled, regal. There was no shouting, no theatrics, no raised emotion. Just a direct challenge to the direction in which the government was steering the country. A challenge that cut through Parliament like a blade through silk. He spoke of responsibility, of continuity, of national identity, of unity, in a time of fragmentation. And although every word was chosen with precision, the message underneath was unmistakable. The monarchy would not be sidelined. The crown still had a voice. And today, the crown was using it. The reaction from Starmer was immediate, but not spoken. It was written across his face. A tightening of the jaw, a shift in posture, a sudden awareness that cameras were capturing every micro-expression. This was not a moment he could spin, not a moment he could dismiss. This was the king, calling out the direction of his leadership in the most public way possible, without even needing to mention his name. Members of Parliament glanced between the two men, some shocked, some entirely still. Some watching eagerly, as if finally witnessing the conflict everyone had been whispering about. Because make no mistake, tensions between the monarchy and Starmer's administration had been brewing for months. Quiet disapproval, strategic leaks, rumored disagreements, and now, the silent battle had come out of the shadows. But here is the detail that matters most, and this is where things shift from political spectacle to national turning point. King Charles was not standing alone. Prince William was present too, not seated, not watching from the sidelines, standing behind his father, steady, calm, unwavering, like the future of the monarchy itself had entered the arena. His expression was serious, focused, controlled, the kind of silent presence that says everything, without needing a single word. The message was clear. This was not just one king speaking. This was the continuity of the monarchy speaking, past, present and future standing as one. Cameras captured the moment, and the images are already circulating. Newspapers are preparing front-page headlines. Broadcast studios are scrambling to rewrite their evening reports. Political advisors are drafting emergency response strategies. Starmer's office is preparing statements, searching desperately for words that can reframe what has just happened. But the reality is already solidified in the minds of the public. The monarchy is not just symbolic. The crown still holds influence. And when the king speaks, people listen. But the question you are waiting for, and the question the entire nation is now asking, is this: what triggered the intervention? What was happening behind the scenes, powerful enough to push the monarch into stepping forward? And here is where the story turns from dramatic to explosive. For months, there have been discussions deep within government circles regarding structural changes to the monarchy's legal protections, financial autonomy, and public representation. Quiet proposals, strategic policy frameworks cloaked in political language. And while these plans were presented as, quote, modern updates, palace insiders recognized them for what they were: attempts to reduce monarchical influence permanently, not abolish the monarchy outright. No, that would be too obvious and too difficult to push through. But to weaken it, to make it so quiet, so background, so powerless, that it would eventually fade without resistance. And Charles knew. He knew from the beginning. He had watched, listened, advised, waited, but now the line had been crossed. This intervention was not spontaneous. It was strategic, calculated, a message delivered at the exact moment when it would be impossible to ignore. And Starmer? He understood exactly what that meant, because for a sitting prime minister, being publicly challenged by the monarch, even subtly, is a political earthquake. The kind that reshapes public perception, the kind that divides party loyalty, the kind that triggers questions within the administration itself, questions that no leader wants whispered behind closed doors. The chamber remained silent as the king concluded his address. He did not look triumphant. He did not look emotional. He simply looked resolved, a man protecting something older, deeper, and larger than any political office. A monarchy carried across centuries, a legacy that survived wars, revolutions, scandals, and societal transformation. And now, he would protect it again. As he turned to leave, Prince William remained just a moment longer, locking eyes with members of Parliament, directly and without hesitation. Not as a threat, not as intimidation, but as recognition. He would inherit this struggle, and he was ready. The monarchy just reminded the nation, and the world, that it is not done. And Starmer? Well, his panic had only just begun. What followed after King Charles walked out of Parliament was not chaos in the form of shouting, outrage, or public spectacle. No, it was worse. It was the kind of silence that means people are thinking, the kind of silence where phones vibrate quietly, but urgently, the kind of silence where you can feel power shifting, alignment breaking, and loyalties being reconsidered in real time. That is the silence that spreads when history changes course. Members of Parliament exchanged looks, cautious, uncertain, calculating. Because whether they supported the monarchy or not, everyone in that chamber understood one fundamental truth. Public perception is power, and the monarchy still held a bond with the people that no politician, no parliament, no prime minister could easily replicate. Political trust may rise and fall, parties may rotate, leaders may change, but the monarchy, when it chooses to speak, speaks with centuries behind every word. Starmer sat still, eyes forward, hands clasped, the kind of posture a person uses when they know every camera in the room is capturing everything. He couldn't afford to react too quickly, too emotional, and he would look threatened, too confident, and he would look dismissive, too defensive, and he would look guilty. But behind that carefully constructed calm was something unmistakable. He had been outmaneuvered, not politically, but symbolically. And symbolism is the monarchy's battlefield, and they are experts at it. Within minutes, footage of the king's entrance and address began circulating online. Clips spread across X, TikTok, and YouTube faster than any official news outlet could publish a headline. And the public reaction was immediate, emotional, fiery, deeply divided. Supporters of the monarchy saw strength, dignity, history being defended. Critics saw overreach, interference, and an outdated institution refusing to step aside. But here's what mattered: everyone was talking. The monarchy wasn't fading quietly. It had just stepped back into the spotlight with precision. Meanwhile, at number 10 Downing Street, panic started taking shape in the form of crisis management meetings. Advisors, communications strategists, political aides, all gathered, all speaking quickly, all searching for the spin. Because the worst thing that can happen to a sitting prime minister is not scandal, not failure, not unpopular policy. The worst thing is losing control of the narrative. And right now, Charles owned the narrative. Statements were drafted, scraps of phrases tested, abandoned, rewritten. Words like respectful dialogue, shared values, and ongoing cooperation appeared repeatedly in early drafts. Code language for, we need to do damage control without making this worse. Because any aggression toward the monarchy would backfire publicly, and any sign of retreat would make Starmer look weak. But someone was watching all of this unfold. Someone with far more to gain or lose from the outcome of this confrontation. Prince William. Unlike Charles, who bore the weight of duty shaped by decades of expectation and scrutiny, William embodied something different: the future. He was not just heir to the throne. He was the bridge between the monarchy's history and the nation's evolving identity. He was the modern king-in-waiting, raised in the public eye, shaped by both tradition and tragedy. And when he stepped into the spotlight behind his father in Parliament, it was not merely symbolic. It was a message to the world. The crown does not stand alone. The crown endures. Inside the palace, discussions were already underway. Advisors debated strategy. Communications teams monitored public sentiment in real time. Senior royal counselors evaluated possible outcomes. But there was no panic there, no frantic scrambling. The monarchy was not reacting, it was executing a plan. Because here is the truth no political strategist wants to admit. When the monarchy enters political conversation intentionally, it has already calculated 10 steps ahead. Meanwhile, political analysts across major networks began dissecting the intervention. Some called it bold, some called it reckless, some called it unprecedented, though historically, it wasn't. Monarchs have intervened before, but not in this era, not in this media landscape, not under this level of global scrutiny. And that is what made it seismic. As narratives formed and debates ignited, the nation found itself pulled into a conversation that cut deeper than politics. This was about identity, legacy, authority, continuity. The question was no longer what did Charles say, but who should hold influence over the direction of the nation? Elected officials or the enduring crown? And this is where the tension evolves into something much bigger. Because as Starmer's administration scrambled to maintain control, leaks began to surface. Documents, memos, meeting summaries, all pointing to the same truth. Plans to minimize the monarchy's public authority were more developed than previously acknowledged. Not just internal discussions, strategic policy frameworks aimed at restructuring royal funding, reducing ceremonial presence, and altering constitutional privileges. Not abolishment, just erosion. The kind of erosion that happens so slowly people don't notice until the foundation is gone. And Charles knew. He had known this was not a reaction. This was a response. There is a difference. The public, meanwhile, found itself divided. Some saw the monarchy as outdated. Others saw it as the last unifying symbol in a fragmented political landscape. And then there were those who didn't align with ideology. They aligned with emotion, with history, with symbolism. And emotion is the most powerful force in national identity. But while the public argued, the real confrontation was just beginning. Because the king had spoken, and now Starmer had to respond. The question was, how? Would he step forward with confidence and defend his policies, risking direct confrontation with the crown? Would he choose diplomacy, attempting to soften tensions and avoid escalation? Or would he retreat, reframing his plans to preserve public stability but sacrificing political strength? Every option had consequences. Every path forward reshaped power. And then there was William, quietly rising in public favor as the monarchy's voice of steadiness. The future king who had weathered press storms, personal tragedy, scandal surrounding his brother, and endless public scrutiny. And yet, he remained composed, disciplined, strategic, and now, visibly ready to protect the institution he would inherit. Make no mistake, this is not just Charles versus Starmer. This is monarchy versus political reform, continuity versus change, public loyalty versus political control, history versus ambition. The nation stands at the center of this clash, watching, reacting, deciding. And the world watches too. Because when a monarchy moves, especially this monarchy, the impact echoes beyond borders. Other nations with monarchies begin to question their own direction. Republics observe the balance of symbolic versus political power. Global leaders take note of how influence can be exercised without legislation, without campaigns, without elections, simply through presence. But this story is not finished. Because King Charles did not just intervene, he set something in motion. A shift, a reckoning, a reminder. And the next move, it is coming. From Buckingham Palace, from Downing Street, from Prince William himself. And when it happens, the balance of power in Britain may never look the same again. By the next morning, the entire nation was awake, not physically, but mentally. Engaged, alert, curious. The king's intervention was no longer just a moment inside Parliament. It had become the conversation. The kind that starts at breakfast tables, spills into cafes, shows up in classrooms, spreads across workplaces, and dominates every social platform with relentless momentum. News presenters didn't just report it, they leaned into it. Headlines didn't just describe it, they dramatized it. Editorials didn't just comment on it, they chose sides. And in a country as politically divided as the UK has become, choosing sides means igniting flame to dry grass. The monarchy's supporters felt energized, reawakened, as though something ancient had stirred, something protective, something rooted in identity. They said, finally, the king has spoken, finally, someone has stepped forward and reminded us of who we are. For them, this was not a breach of political neutrality, this was leadership, this was courage, this was the crown defending the country, not just ruling it. But opposition voices grew just as loud. They called the king's intervention dangerous, irresponsible, a threat to the democratic balance. Quote, they said, a monarch must not interfere. A monarchy that interferes is a monarchy that oversteps. This is not how modern Britain functions. And so the debate sharpened, not into quiet disagreement, but into a national divide. Not just what should happen next, but who gets to decide the direction of the nation. Parliament, elected by the people, or the monarchy, trusted by tradition. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the situation was far calmer than the storm outside. The king met with his senior advisors, not reacting, but observing, not panicking, but evaluating. He understood the power of silence after action. Because once a message has been delivered, its impact grows on its own. Prince William was there too, part of every briefing, every discussion, every strategic evaluation. His role was not ceremonial. He was learning, preparing, absorbing the political terrain he would one day inherit. And here's what matters. William was not urging retreat. He was supporting forward momentum. He understood something important. The monarchy cannot survive by staying silent in times of national tension. Silence may preserve neutrality, but it does not preserve relevance. And relevance is what keeps the monarchy alive. Meanwhile, in Downing Street, the mood was the exact opposite. Tense, restless, uneasy. Advisors and ministers debated strategy with raised voices behind closed doors. Some urged Starmer to confront the king publicly, to assert parliamentary authority, to remind the nation that elected officials, not hereditary rulers, lead the nation. Others insisted that doing so would be political suicide, that the public would not support confrontation with the crown, that the monarchy, especially under Charles and William, still held massive emotional and cultural influence. Starmer listened, but he was tired, not physically tired. Politically tired, because this was not just about a speech, this was about power slipping. A prime minister gains power by controlling the narrative, the pace, the conversation. But once the monarchy entered the conversation on its own terms, Starmer was no longer setting the pace, he was reacting to it. And in politics, reacting is losing, so he made a decision. A public address would be scheduled, carefully worded, strategically controlled, visually composed, and emotionally calibrated. Not a rebuttal. Not an attack, but a message intended to look strong, without looking combative, respectful, without looking submissive, clear, without being provocative. The speech would be recorded, prepared, tested, refined. But before Starmer could speak, Prince William spoke first, not through Parliament, not through an official political address, but through something far more powerful, a direct public message. A video, not flashy, not theatrical, not scripted to perfection, but genuine, filmed in a simple, dignified setting. William appeared calm, clear, focused, his voice steady, his posture confident but not aggressive. He didn't mention Starmer. He didn't mention policy. He didn't mention conflict. He spoke about the nation, about unity, about heritage, about the crown's responsibility to protect, not power, but continuity. He spoke about the importance of remembering who we are, not as political factions, but as people connected through history, culture, and shared identity. He spoke not as a king, but as a leader. And that's when everything changed. Because William did something no political strategist could counter. He humanized the monarchy. He reminded the public that the monarchy was not an institution of power, but of identity. Not a relic, but a thread woven through the nation's story. The reaction was immediate. Social media exploded, not with arguments, but with emotional resonance. People who had felt politically disillusioned, disconnected from debates, tired of headlines, felt something stir. Something familiar. Something they couldn't fully explain. Not loyalty, not ideology. Connection. Meanwhile, Starmer's planned address suddenly felt weaker, before he even delivered it. The narrative had shifted again, not because of words, but because of timing. William spoke at the right moment. Starmer would now look like he was responding, not leading. And that is the most dangerous position for a prime minister to be in. Because once the public sees you following, rather than guiding, authority begins to crack. Inside political circles, the panic was no longer subtle. It was real. Advisors now debated not how to respond, but how to regain momentum, how to reclaim narrative, how to bring the public's attention back into the realm of politics.